10 wheels, not 6, 10. And that's not even the most interesting thing about this concept. What you're looking at right now is something I had to stop and stare at for a solid 5 minutes before I even started writing about it. Because whoever built this inside an AI, whatever they were imagining, they were not imagining a road trip. They were imagining a different category of existence. Now, full transparency right up front, the way I always do it, what you're looking at is a fictional AI-generated concept design. It doesn't exist in any factory, no manufacturer is building this, no one is taking orders. It's pure imagination. And honestly, that's exactly why it's worth analyzing, because when you remove the constraints of boardrooms and budgets and safety regulations, what you're left with is pure design intent. And the intent on this thing is absolutely wild. This is the Nexus Phantom X1, and we're going full walk around today. Exterior, interior, powertrain logic, the tech that would need to exist to make this real. And at the end, I'll tell you the one detail on this concept that I genuinely think is ahead of its time. But stay with me because there is something happening on that roofline that I have not seen on any other motorhome concept, real or fictional, and I'm saving it. We'll get there. Let's start at the front, because the front of any vehicle is its face. It's the first visual contract it makes with you. And the Nexus Phantom X1 does not shake hands, it stares you down. That front fascia is built entirely on sharp, converging angles, almost like a stealth aircraft head-on. You've got a pair of swept LED headlights that cut inward in a V-shape, meeting at the center of the hood with a precision that feels more like a luxury watch than a vehicle. The blue electroluminescent trim that outlines those headlights, that's not decoration, that's a signature. On a dark road at distance, this thing announces itself like nothing else. Below the main headlight cluster, there are secondary fog position lights, again wrapped in that same blue accent trim. The lower bumper geometry is faceted, almost diamond cut, breaking the light across multiple angled planes. The result is a front end that catches and holds your eye even in a photograph. What does this front face communicate? Power, precision, and an almost aggressive statement that this vehicle belongs to no existing category. Now, step back and take in that side profile, because this is where the proportions of the Nexus Phantom X1 really start to make sense as a living space. The body is split into two clear visual tiers. The lower section, everything below that strong character line running the full length of the vehicle, is muscular, wide, planted firmly to the ground. This is the mechanical foundation. The upper section, the habitable module, rises above it with a sense of almost architectural calm. Wide glass panels, clean surfacing, a roofline that's surprisingly aerodynamic for something this tall. That side glass is enormous. The panoramic window running along the upper living section appears to span nearly the full habitable length of this concept, and what that means for the person inside is transformative. Morning light doesn't come in through a porthole, it floods the entire living space. If you've ever camped and wanted to wake up to the landscape instead of a wall, this design philosophy takes that feeling and builds it into the architecture. That's not just pretty, that's a quality of life decision crystallized into glass and aluminum. And there's something inside that glass that I need to point out, because I've looked at this for a long time and I'm still not entirely sure what I'm seeing. Those interior reflections appear to show a star field pattern. Whether that's ambient ceiling lighting, a projection system, or a smart glass treatment, the effect is genuinely stunning. Now, let's talk about the shapes themselves, because on this concept, every angle is earning its keep. The faceted bodywork you see across the entire surface of the Phantom X1 isn't just a stylistic choice, it's a design language that's been used in aerospace to manage airflow by creating multiple small pressure zones across a surface, rather than one large one. Now, in a real-world build scenario, you'd need sophisticated computational fluid dynamics to validate whether this faceting actually reduces drag, or whether it's purely aesthetic, but the intent clearly points toward intelligent airflow management, not random geometry. The upper body narrows slightly toward the rear, a classic taper that reduces the low-pressure wake behind the vehicle. For something this large and heavy, that taper in a near-production scenario could mean meaningfully better highway efficiency, which, if this concept ever translated to a real electric powertrain, would directly translate to more range between charges. Every shape is an argument, and on the Phantom X1, the argument is this is not an RV. This is a land yacht designed by someone who took aeronautics seriously. The finish on this concept appears to be a deep metallic silver, not a flat silver, but something multitonal. Watch how the light moves across those faceted panels. Each angled surface catches the light at a slightly different angle, creating a shifting, almost liquid quality as you move around the vehicle. It's the kind of finish you'd expect on a six-figure sports car. On something this size, it has an almost sci-fi quality. The gold accent trim threading through the lighting signatures adds warmth against the cool blue electroluminescent lines. That cold, warm contrast, icy blue against warm gold, is a deliberate luxury signal. You see it in high-end watchmaking. You see it in private aviation interiors. Here, it elevates what could have been just another futuristic sketch into something that feels genuinely premium. Now, those wheels. The Nexus Phantom X1 appears to run a 6-wheel configuration, 3 axles visible on the right side of the concept. Large, multi-spoke alloy wheels in a dark gunmetal finish wrapped in what appear to be wide-profile performance tires. On a motorhome, this wheel count is a serious structural statement. In a real-world build scenario, that 6-wheel layout would distribute the vehicle's considerable weight across a much larger footprint, which matters enormously for off-road capability and stability. Imagine taking something this luxurious onto a forest track, a mountain pass, or a remote coastal overlook. The 6-wheel platform makes that credible. The stance is low and wide for a vehicle this tall, which contributes to the planted to the earth presence this thing projects in every angle. These wheels don't just look aggressive, they tell you this concept was designed to go places most luxury motorhomes would never dare. The exterior of the Nexus Phantom X1 alone makes this one of the most compelling concept vehicles I've analyzed on this channel. The design language is coherent, the details reward close attention, and the presence, the sheer visual mass of this thing is unlike anything I've covered before. But honestly, the exterior is the easy part. What I think is happening inside this thing, based on every proportion and design decision we just walked through, is where this concept gets really genuinely interesting. Now, we don't have interior renders of the Nexus Phantom X1, but here's the thing. After a walk-around this thorough, the exterior tells you everything you need to know. Design is a language. If you know how to read it, the outside of a vehicle describes the inside almost completely. So let's do what we do on this channel. Let's read the exterior and build the interior, logically, proportionally, systematically. Based on the exterior dimensions, and I'd estimate this concept sits somewhere in the 45 to 52 foot range if those proportions translate to real scale, the habitable section appears to occupy roughly 2/3 of the total vehicle length. The front driving module takes up the forward third, with that elevated cab structure providing excellent forward visibility. The upper living module, that clean, glass-rich section above the character line, is where the real story is. From the exterior roofline height, my best estimate places interior ceiling height somewhere between 6 feet 6 inches and 7 feet. In a motorhome, that number is everything. Below 6 feet and you're always slightly crouched. Above 6 feet 6 and suddenly it doesn't feel like a vehicle anymore. It feels like a room. That psychological shift is the difference between a good motorhome and a great one. Entering from what I'd expect to be a large hydraulic door on the driver's side, probably framed in that same gold trim language we see on the exterior, you'd step into a main living area designed around that panoramic side glass. And that glass changes everything. Most motorhomes feel like tubes, enclosed, narrow, slightly oppressive even when they're well appointed. The Phantom X1's wide panoramic glazing would flood the living space with natural light and, more importantly, dissolve the boundary between inside and outside. Imagine pulling this into a high alpine meadow at sunset. You're inside, you're warm, you're in a luxury environment, and through that glass, the entire mountain range is your living room wall. That's what this design philosophy is actually proposing, not just a vehicle, an observation platform. And that star field effect I mentioned in the glass earlier, my best guess is smart glass ambient lighting integrated into the ceiling above the living area, a star ceiling, the kind you'd find in a Rolls-Royce, scaled up to fill the entire living module. Fall asleep to the stars whether you're parked or not. That's a detail that would make people cry when they first see it. Based on the rear portion of the exterior, the way the roofline maintains consistent height all the way to the back, I'd expect the sleeping quarters to occupy the full rear section of the habitable module. In a concept this size, a full king-size transverse bed is entirely realistic. The width of the habitable section appears to be significantly wider than a standard motor coach, and that extra width is the critical factor. A transverse king doesn't just fit better, it means you can roll out of bed from either side, move freely, and the bedroom actually functions like a bedroom, rather than a puzzle you have to solve every morning. Privacy would be handled through a floor-to-ceiling partition, probably a frosted glass panel consistent with the design language we see outside, separating the sleeping area from the main living space. In real-world camping terms, you can have people socializing in the living area while someone sleeps. That's not luxury, that's just basic human functionality that most motorhomes don't actually provide. The kitchen in a concept like this would likely occupy the midship section, positioned centrally to serve both the forward lounge and the rear dining area. Given the design philosophy on display, the attention to materials, the precision of the exterior surfaces, I'd expect an induction cooktop, concealed appliance bays, and surfaces that are both beautiful and functional, not the faux granite laminate you find in production RVs. Real stone, real hardware, real materials that make cooking feel like cooking rather than a compromise. Because there's a philosophy embedded in this exterior. Whoever imagined this concept believed that living well doesn't stop when the road begins, it starts there. In a vehicle this size, a wet bath is simply not the right solution. The proportions allow for something most motorhomes can't offer, a properly separated bathroom with a dedicated shower enclosure, a real vanity, and the kind of fixtures you wouldn't apologize for. In a real-world build scenario, the engineers would need to solve the same water management challenges all motorhomes face. Tank capacity, gray water handling, pressure systems, but the form factor here allows for substantially larger tanks than a standard coach. Off-grid capability in a vehicle this size, with smart water management systems, could realistically support extended backcountry stays without hookups. That's the promise embedded in that six-wheel stance. Up front, that elevated cab structure we noted on the exterior creates something unusual, a cockpit that's genuinely separate from the living space architecturally, not just a driver's seat that happens to be at the front of a living room. The forward visibility from that elevated cab would be exceptional, the kind of panoramic forward view that makes navigating mountain passes feel like command rather than anxiety. I'd expect a curved display cluster wrapping the full width of the cab, perhaps with augmented reality navigation overlays and a control interface that borrows from private aviation more than from automotive tradition. In the world of this concept, you don't drive this thing, you pilot it. Now let's talk about what would actually power something like the Nexus Phantom X1, because this is where fictional concepts get real and where the engineering either holds up or falls apart. A vehicle this size and weight, I'd estimate somewhere north of 30,000 pounds in a real build, has enormous energy demands. The propulsion system that makes the most sense for this concept is a dual electric motor configuration, one motor per primary drive axle, with the third axle providing additional stability and load distribution. In a near-future production scenario, you're looking at a combined output probably in the range of 600 to 900 horsepower, not for performance, but for the torque required to move mass this significant with confidence. For range, you'd need a large format battery pack, realistically in the 350 to 500 kilowatt-hour range to deliver anything meaningful for long-distance travel. The closest real-world equivalent to what would be needed here is the battery architecture being developed for heavy commercial electric vehicles. Think Class 8 electric semi-platforms, scaled for a luxury application. Now, about that roofline. Remember the curiosity seed I planted at the start? Those blue glowing pods on the roof are my primary evidence that this concept imagines a solar integration system, but not the flat panel type you see bolted onto production RVs as an afterthought. What those roof elements suggest is an integrated photovoltaic array, potentially curved to match the roofline geometry, potentially using next-generation perovskite solar technology that can generate meaningfully more energy per square meter than conventional silicon panels. The technology to do this elegantly, to fully integrate solar generation into a curved architectural surface without it looking like an afterthought, doesn't fully exist yet at commercial scale, but it's coming, and this concept appears to be designed around that future, not around today's constraints. That's what I mean when I say this design is ahead of its time. It's not imagining what's available now, it's imagining what becomes available next. For off-grid capability, and this is where the camping and overlanding community is going to get very interested, a vehicle this size with properly integrated solar, a large enough battery reserve, and smart energy management could realistically sustain itself for extended periods without any external power source. Remote mountain locations, coastal cliffs, desert plateaus, the places most people only reach by backpack, this concept imagines reaching by living room. All right, verdict time, and I'm going to be real with you the way I always am on this channel. What the Nexus Phantom X1 does genuinely well, the design language is extraordinarily coherent. Most concept vehicles, real or fictional, have an identity crisis somewhere. a front end that doesn't match the rear, details that feel like they came from 3 different design studios. The Phantom X1 doesn't have that problem. Every surface, every lighting element, every proportion decision tells the same story. That is hard to achieve even with unlimited creative freedom. Whoever imagined this concept had a singular, uncompromised vision. The 6-wheel platform is genuinely clever, not just visually dramatic, but logically sound for a vehicle of this scale and ambition. The implied off-road and off-grid capability gives this concept a purpose that goes beyond aesthetics. It's not just beautiful, it's argued to be functional in environments where most luxury vehicles refuse to go. What I'd question. Now, what seems challenging, that faceted, angular body geometry is spectacular in a render. In a real-world manufacturing scenario, those compound angles and sharp panel transitions become enormously expensive to produce in metal. You're talking about hand-formed panels or advanced composite manufacturing. This is a concept designed without the filter of a production budget, and that's both its greatest strength and its most obvious limitation. I'd also want to understand the aerodynamics more carefully in a real build, because faceted surfaces can generate unwanted turbulence at highway speeds depending on exactly how those angles interact with airflow. Beautiful geometry and efficient geometry are not always the same thing. The one detail I keep coming back to, the thing I find most genuinely impressive about this concept, is the integration of the lighting as a design language, rather than as an add-on. The blue electroluminescent trim doesn't just illuminate, it defines the entire architecture of the vehicle. Remove those light lines, and the Phantom X1 would be a completely different object. The lighting is the design. That level of intentionality is rare even in serious production vehicles. That's ahead of its time. That's the detail I'll remember. What I'd change. If I could change one thing, I'd open up the lower body. That strong visual division between the mechanical base and the living module is effective, but the lower section reads as slightly impenetrable. A single generous reveal, a sculpted step, a transparent underbody section would connect the vehicle's power to the ground in a way that would make it even more visually compelling. What does the Nexus Phantom X1 say about where luxury mobility is heading? It says this: the definition of luxury is expanding. It's no longer just about the materials inside a vehicle or the badge on the front. It's about where you can go, how long you can stay, and how good it feels to be there. The best future motorhomes won't be compromises between comfort and capability. They'll be both without apology. This concept will never exist exactly as you've seen it today, and honestly, that's not the point. The point is what it makes you think about. The point is the question it asks. Why should going off-grid mean giving anything up? It's a concept, it's fictional, it's AI-generated, and it's still one of the most thoughtfully imagined mobile living spaces I've analyzed on this channel. My question for you this week, and I read every single comment, is this: would you actually live in something like this full-time? Yes or no, but tell me where, because I have a feeling the answers are going to be as interesting as this concept. Drop it below. If this kind of deep dive concept analysis is what you come to YouTube for, if you want someone who actually takes the time to break down not just what something looks like, but why it looks that way and what it means, there's a lot more of it on this channel, and hitting subscribe is the easiest way to make sure you don't miss the next one.